If I had started when Billy was winning championships, then I may not have been able to get all the hands-on experience I got. We create innovative programming that will help better prepare young people to be the best versions of themselves. If this internship ends and I got to do this and I have to go do whatever I do for the rest of my life, at least I had this experience. I had to go to work while Dan Marino was still the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins.
Welcome back to another episode on the Success in South Florida podcast. I'm your host, Adam Rosson, and on today's episode, I'm so excited to have Seth Levit here. Seth is the executive director of the Jason Taylor Foundation, and we'll dive deep into him, his career, his sports career, his nonprofit career, just everything about you, Seth. I'm so happy to meet you about a month ago.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to meet some of the folks here at the firm, and just excited to be on this show.
Yeah. And, we're shooting this on a Friday in July. We have our summer internship program here. We have 10 amazing interns this summer. You just spent about an hour and a half speaking.
They were incredible.
Yeah.
What a great group you've got there. It makes me feel really good about the future of your industry, because those were some sharp kids.
Yeah, we do. We're very lucky. We have 10 of them, ranging from rising seniors in high school to rising 3Ls in law school. And, every summer we have this program, and we only get the cream of the crop. So we're very lucky for our criminal justice, program. And even though you're not technically in the criminal justice field, it's great to have somebody who still is in an adjacent field.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the same messaging, it's all the same from what we do. So it's amazing. So let's get into this, and let's just talk about, who you are and your story. So, where, it's called Success in South Florida. Were you born and raised here?
I wasn't born here, but I was raised here. I've been in South Florida since probably 11 months old. I was born in Wilmington, Delaware. My mother moved back to South Florida because she grew up down here, went to South Broward High School. She lived in Hollywood. I grew up in Hollywood, and then we kind of started gradually moving north. We did the plantation thing up to Coral Springs. I went away to college, and I live now more in kind of the Weston area. But yeah, I'm a South Florida guy through and through. Don't like cold weather. Right. I've gone away a couple times, did an internship in Cleveland many, many moons ago. But South Florida is my home, and I hope that it always will be.
Yeah, me too. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to do this podcast, is really just to have it be a real local, flavor here for everything that we're doing.
Love that.
So you went to UF.
I did.
Right? Go Gators.
All day.
Okay, you were there a little bit before I was. But,
you didn't have to say it like that.
Well, no, you had some great years, right?
I did.
So were you there for the championship?
I was there, so I got there. I just missed it, but I feel like I was a part of it because I was doing my internship. But I got to see Danny Werfel do all the great things that he did, and saw Eric Rhett and just some great Florida Gators. And then I also saw the basketball team. It wasn't Billy Donovan, it wasn't Billy Ball yet, it was Lon Kruger, but they were starting to become relevant. And that was a lot of fun. And it helped me on my journey, because I think the fact that they weren't, if I had started when Billy was winning championships, then I may not have been able to get all the hands-on experience I got when basketball was really more of the I don't want to use the term redheaded stepchild, but basketball wasn't what it is. That's exactly right. And it still is a football school, but man, they had a great run.
Right. And I started in '99, so Billy Ball was already in effect. My freshman year, we went to the Final Four, or the championship game.
Well, we went to the Final Four, so that we had Andrew DeClerc, Dimitri Hill, oh my God, that's right, Dan Cross, Craig, what was Craig's last name? I don't know, they had two great guards, and they were a lot of fun.
That was a great team, that really was. So what did you do at UF in relation to sports?
Yeah, so the nice thing is that when I got to the University of Florida, I knew I wanted to work for the Miami Dolphins. That was my goal. How could I do it? What can I study? So I was going to study sports administration. A lot of young people get to college, they don't know what they're going to study. We hear about the whole fifth-year senior thing, sixth-year senior thing. I had a path and a plan, and so whether or not it was a good plan, I don't know, but I had one. And I got very lucky my freshman year. The guy who was in the dorm next to me was working for the baseball team, and he was running the scoreboard, and he introduced me to the sports information department. And I came in there one day, and I was like, my God, I can't believe that you can do this, and that there were all of these offices with people that were employed to work around sports.
Just for sports.
Just for sports. And I fortunately gravitated very quickly towards what I think suited my skill set. And it was called the Sports Information Department there. You hear communications or media relations. And I was kind of the intern's intern. I was just a student volunteer. I showed up. I probably wasn't mature enough yet. I wasn't ready to work and grind and do the things that were required, but I saw people do them and I learned about it. And some of the people that I worked under are still people that I stay in touch with to this day.
So as somebody back then, you know, you're a young adult, right? New college kid, and you said you didn't have some of maybe the maturity or the work ethic. Well, how did that develop over that 4-year period for you at that point in your life?
You have to see it. You have to see that that's what's required. You have to see that people are going to put in those kind of hours. I imagine it's the same in your profession. There's the things like I know about sport. I can talk well. I can write well. I can do all of these things. I have the skill set, but you can't learn work ethic. I mean, you can learn to work hard and get good grades, but you don't know that after an NBA game, you might be working till 3 in the morning, updating game notes so that they're ready for the next day. You don't know that. You don't know that you could have your whole day planned and a head coach can walk in and change your schedule just like that, and you immediately have to do something else. Those things have to happen on the job or on the volunteer job or on the internship. And so that's where it was developed, as I saw what the guys were doing. I saw the hours they put in. I saw the fact that sports are entertainment, which means you are working when other people are relaxing. And so game days at the University of Florida, football, you know what that's like.
Oh, yeah.
People come from miles around. You've got all those bull gators who show up in the RVs and they spend 3 days partying, and it's just one big party for them and for the students. And for me, I was at the stadium 4 hours before anybody else was, and I had to wear a suit and tie, and I was going to be there 4 hours after everyone else. And so you learn what that's like just by going through it.
Right. So some people think that it's all glamour and glitz, but when you're in there working, right?
Oh, that side.
Right, exactly. You know, and the amount of preparation. Well, you know, and I would argue too, from the athlete's perspective, it's the same. They'll have the glamour and glitz in their moment,
right?
But in order to get to that moment, it's 5 a.m. workouts. It's 11 p.m. workouts. It's
no doubt.
You know,
there's a great Muhammad Ali quote, and I certainly can only paraphrase it. But he talks about everyone before you can have the bright lights and the championships and all the cameras in your face, what people don't see is exactly that. It's 5 a.m. running on a dusty road where there's nobody else around and nobody else cares, and you just got to put that work in. And it is similar in that regard. Not that I'm comparing myself to Muhammad Ali.
Well, you never know.
that would be quite elite.
But we all learn from the greats, right? And we all try to take it and take what we like, don't do what we don't like, and just push it forward to us and to what we do. So you had a great time at UF.
I did.
What do you do next, right? I mean, because I remember one of my best friends who we've had on the show. He wanted to be an athletic director, a college athletic director, total sports guy, and he kind of pivoted a little bit Miami Marathon, and that pivoted to Zoo Miami and more of marketing and different things. But his heart was always in sports. He graduated. He's like, I just don't think I can make a career out of this. So how did you do it?
I didn't think that I could make a career out of anything else, right? So it was just like no plan B. My mom wanted me to have a plan B, and I didn't actually think about it this way. But years later, I worked with a Dolphins lineman named Mark Dixon, and he said, "Don't have a plan B because you'll use it." And so in some ways, that was kind of my, again, I don't know that I would say that to the 10 young people over there that you're mentoring, your interns, but that was my mentality, is I was going to work for the Miami Dolphins some way, shape, or form. What's great about working in sport or studying sport for schools, I can't imagine there's any schools that don't do this, but an internship is required. You have to do an internship in your field to graduate. Now, some people were working for Gainesville Health and Fitness or whatever it might be. And I got very lucky because I was volunteering in the University Athletic Association Sports Information Department. There were 2 or 3 other people like me that were doing the same thing. And there was one young lady who had the wherewithal to send resumes to every Major League Baseball team, every National Football League team, every hockey team. I didn't do all that. Like, I sent something to the Dolphins and got turned down. I sent something to 2 or 3 other NFL teams. I was very small-minded at that point. I was like, okay, the Buccaneers, I can tolerate that. And
not going to the
typical spot. I'm not going to the cold. I'm definitely not going to work for the Bills. Are you kidding me?
Right.
And all of those things. But I was sitting around one day, And this young lady came into the office and said, does anybody want to consider the Cleveland Cavaliers? Because I'm not taking it, but they seem to have a good internship program. Well, I have family in Cleveland. And I was like, well, I'll take a look. And they had this 10-page booklet of all these different internships that they offered in every department within the organization. It was a very sophisticated program, and one of which was media relations, was my specialty. I just cold called them. And they actually returned my call. And they said, when can you come up and interview? I remember telling my father, I said, I want to go, but I don't want you spending money on a ticket. And what if I don't get it? And now I'm going to be flying all around the country doing interviews, and you're going to spend all this money. And my dad said, let's go to the first one before we start worrying about the second one and the third one. And I went and bought a suit. I didn't own a suit. I had a friend tie a tie for me. I didn't know how to tie a tie. You can see how much I still like ties to this day. But I went up and I did my interview, and I got hired on. And I got to spend an entire season with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was one of the most life-changing events for me. It was so impactful. I love to this day the people that I worked for, Bob Zink, Bob Price, John Gates. Really got to be hands-on and learned about the professional sports industry in a way that I had no idea I could possibly learn. And then what was also very fortuitous is that Harvey Green, who was the longtime PR director for the Miami Dolphins, who I had met with. He was kind enough to meet with me, but told me he was only going to hire a graduate student. He had hired Bob Price and Bob Zink, two guys with the Cavs. I mentioned, I was like, I thought I'd sound smart and quote advice I got from someone else. I said, well, Harvey Green, and they start laughing. I said, you know Harvey Green? He said, Harvey hired both of us. What are the odds that would happen? So, you gotta be a little bit lucky. You gotta work your ass off, and you gotta impress people, so that when you're not in the room, they say good things about you. And fortunately, I must have done enough of that.
Well, Seth, there's so much to unpack from just that story, and I definitely want to get into the other stuff, but I think this is gold here, because you're talking about having a plan B or not having a plan B and getting that advice. And, before, when you spoke to the interns, just an hour ago, you talked about playing all in. And that's, core value number 4.
Core value number 4.
Core value number 4, Roston Law Firm, is play all in. And I think there's a lot of liberation when you play all in, because then it's, hey, whether it's a superhero movie or whatever it is, we're not planning for the return trip home, right? We're going here and we're winning, and that's that. There is no other option, right? And we're laying it all on the table, and I think that's really important. So I think that advice of not having a plan B, I think the person was right, because then so many times our brains limit our behavior, right, and really hold us back, either consciously or subconsciously, when we have that, well, if it doesn't work, right? And, even you talking about the emotions of the fear creeping in. Well, what if I don't get it? I spend this money, right? I don't have a suit. They're just excuses. And it's just things that a lot of people have in their head. And I always say fear is false events appearing real. I make mistakes every day. And it's never what we think it is, right? It's never catastrophic. And so kudos to you for pushing through that, whether you knew you were doing it or not, right? At the time, being very young, and just saying, screw it, I'm going to do it. And then you mentioned luck. Well, I'm a big believer in, it's luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right?
I agree with that.
And I think people, you make your own luck here. And that's the thing. If you didn't take the initiative to raise your hand and say, I'm interested, let me take a look, you cold called, right?
Exactly right.
Did you, when you cold called, did you prep? Did you write out what you were going to say? Were you nervous?
Gosh, it was so long ago. I definitely was nervous. That part I know. I don't know that I did a whole lot of prep. I think I just called and said, I was handed this, I see this, I'm interested in the opportunity, what's the next step?
Well, I'll tell you, so one of the things I did at the end of my first year of law school down at Miami, I just did not like law school. I wanted to be a litigator, and the whole first year is nothing to do with the courtroom. And it's, Miami was very old school at the time. I thought it was more legal hazing. And I was miserable. And I was a good high school basketball player, not good enough, maybe good enough to play somewhere very small, maybe not even play much. But I went to UF, I wanted to be a normal kid. But I thought I would love coaching. I wrote out this personal statement of why I wanted to get into coaching. Sure. My old principal at Chaminade Madonna was he moved to Gulliver. So I was like, this is great. I'll call him up. Maybe he'll hook me up with the coach. I put on a suit. I met with him, and he's just like, I'm sorry, I talked to the coach, and he doesn't know you. There's no spots. I'm like, I'll do anything. Like nothing. So then I was reading the Miami Herald back when we actually had real newspapers, and I saw that this famous, pretty well-known coach was recruited from Miami Northwestern to come to Chaminade. So I wrote out, I was real nervous. I wrote out everything I want to say, and I just cold called him. And I was shocked he picked up. It went to his cell phone, which I didn't know. I thought I was going to go to like the basketball office. And I was like fumbling through my words, but I was kind of prepared.
Sure.
And, you know, for me, that was a big leap because I've definitely pushed myself out of my comfort zone to be more outgoing. And, you know, I was a little more shy back then. And it was just one of those things that, you know, for me, it was major. It was just to push myself and write it all down and say, you know what, what's the worst that can happen, right? Okay, I get rejected again, big deal.
Yeah, well, you have to have that if you're chasing something, right? Now, there's something to be said for, as you mentioned, being younger at that point in time. And so what is the worst that can happen? Get to this stage of our lives, we've got, you know, you've got a wife, I've got 3 kids. What is the worst that can happen? Well, it can be pretty bad if you take certain risks. But I think that anybody who has achieved anything remotely great, successful, however you want to define it, and we all kind of define what we think is great, right? But I think anybody that has done that has had to take some kind of a risk at some point, unless everything has just been handed to you, and that certainly wasn't my story.
Right, and I don't think it's with most people. There's always, you know, whether you've had it better than others, there's still got to work for it, and you know, and one thing leads to the next, which leads to the next, and you know, I couldn't agree with you more on those things. Now, you spent the year there, right?
With the Cavs. Correct.
Great experience. You're grinding, right? I mean, how many hours a day were you?
Oh my God! And you know, single, was living in a town that by myself that I didn't know. I had my uncle was there, and I had some remote family. But all the friends that I built were within the organization. I lived at the place. I lived at, it was called Gund Arena at the time, and I literally lived there, and it was okay. I could eat there, could shower there, could play basketball there, could work there. Like I was up there what else did you need at
22, 23-year-old kid's dream, right?
That's it. I was 22 years old. Yeah. 1995.
So you spent your 1 year there.
Yep.
And did that immediately transition into the Dolphins?
It did. So that was, the goal was always to come back, you know. And I stayed in touch with Harvey Green. I actually got tickets to a Dolphins game because they played in Cincinnati. And it's kind of a fun story. And I know we'll get to, may or may not get to the podcast later, but I do this podcast now with O.J. McDuffie. Well, 1995, the Dolphins are playing in Cincinnati. I ask for the weekend off from the Cavs. I get tickets through Harvey Green. One ticket. That's all I need is one ticket. Literally the top row of the stadium in Cincinnati. I drive from Cleveland to Cincinnati by myself. I go to the game. I'm sitting around O.J. McDuffie's family. Everybody there has got a McDuffie jersey. Unbelievable. And then if anybody's a big-time Dolphins fan, they know this game. The Dolphins are losing a game they shouldn't be losing. I can't believe I've done all this, and I'm going to see this team play. The one time this year I get to see them play in person, and they're losing. And Dan Marino starts bringing them back on a game-winning drive at the end. And how does he complete the drive? But he throws a touchdown pass to O.J. McDuffie, who makes this improbable catch, and he wins the game. His family goes nuts. You know, and O.J., it was 95. He was in his third year, and I'm a huge fan. And fast forward all of these years later, and we've been hosting this podcast together.
Oh, that's so cool. So yeah, and then those are just some examples of sports and how things just, I think life, you know, is really, you know, just so ingrained with sports and relationships and how these things can just connect and come full circle.
Absolutely. Right. And I didn't answer your question though, but so I stayed in touch with Harvey, and then we reached out to him. And my bosses with the Cavs reached out and said, look, this kid is really good. And they actually, the setup was interesting because it was kind of cubicles. And so I'm sitting there and listening to like my fate in the hands of Bob Zink. And he calls Harvey. And I think Harvey had said, well, I don't know. And he's not a graduate student, whatever. And I'll never forget what he said. And it stayed with me. And to this day, he's my guy for this. But he said, look, you could look long and hard and maybe you'll find somebody better. I doubt it, but maybe you'll find, oh no, he said, you won't. He said, maybe you'll find someone as good. I doubt it, but maybe you will. He goes, but you will not find someone better. And that was all he had to say. And what it made me realize, first of all, it made me realize two things. One, I'm indebted to this guy because he's going to help me achieve my dream. But the other thing it made me realize is how important it is to build a network. It is so important to build a network because I would have never gotten that chance if I hadn't proven myself to Bob Zink. But Bob Zink believed in me enough to put his reputation on the line and tell that story to Harvey Green, and Harvey gave me a shot. And I made the most of it.
Right, that's an amazing story. So, and I definitely want to talk about building a network, because I think for anybody listening to this, or
it's everything.
Watching this, right? It's so important, and there, you want it to be organic, you want it to be for the right reasons, but there definitely is an art and a science to networking, to building connections and relationships. And I'll bring it back to what we do, at Ross & Law Firm. Yeah, we do shows like this. We do fancy marketing at times, but the core of our firm,
fancy marketing.
Yeah, exactly, right? We got Yetis, we got cups, we got, changed our logo. We got all these different things. But the core of what we do is the human connection with our clients, which is one of the major things that makes us different. And that's what networking is about human connection.
Well,
not what can you, right. You have to be authentic. It's not what can you do for me, what can I do for you? It has to be truly about the connection first and foremost. And then I think when you have the connection, you have the authenticity, then things just naturally happen because good people want to help others. Right? And that's what it is. And you want to help people that you know, like, and trust.
I agree.
So, yeah.
And if you, in the working sector, if you prove that you're good, like there's a selfish interest in people too. When we're hiring, I want to hire somebody not just to give them a job to be nice. I want them to be able to help me and my organization and be the best that it can be. And we want to build, use a sports reference, I want to build the best roster that we could possibly build. And so if my motivation as a head coach is to have the best players because I'm going to get more victories, that's fine. We all have this. The goal is for all of us to win. We're just motivated for different reasons.
Right.
So
yeah, and you made your opportunities because of the value that you provided to the Cavs and your bosses, and they saw that. And I'm sure they would have been perfectly fine if you didn't move, because they would have liked to probably kept you, but they knew where you wanted to be, and it's great that they advocated.
When I'm putting 2 winter coats on just to go grab lunch for everybody, they knew I was getting out of Cleveland as fast as possible. Right. I had to get back to South Florida, man.
Right. So you come back, right? You come back, you have that 1-year experience, and so talk to us about what that was like, coming back.
Oh man, it was the absolute best. It was 1996. Jimmy Johnson had just taken over. It was his first year as a Dolphins head coach. You ever seen the movie School Ties? Brendan Fraser, Jewish kid, and he goes play the all-Catholic school. And at the beginning, he goes there and he takes off his Jewish star and he hides it because at that time it wasn't accepted, and he just wanted to be accepted as a football player and nobody to know. And then it came back later on and became an issue. As a kid, I had this Dolphin. Remember in the mall, I used to go buy these charms, and I had a gold Miami Dolphins charm. Everyone gives me a hard time because I wore it outside of my shirt, but that's what you did in the 90s.
Right, yeah.
And so I wore it outside of my shirt. I took it off, and I remember I felt like Brendan Fraser in School Ties, and I put it in the cabinet, and that was it. I wasn't going to go to work to be a fan. As much as I was a huge fan, I had to go in there and be a professional. I had to prove that my fandom gave me an expertise, and I knew the history of this team, and I wanted this team, and I would do anything for this team that that was within the scope of my job. But I didn't want to come across as a face painter, as a crazy fan. And so I always remember taking that off. But man, to drive in, they were in Davie at that point in time, back when that facility was considered one of the best in the league. Now they have the Taj Mahal. But I would drive into work every day and say, how lucky am I? That if this internship ends and I got to do this and I have to go do whatever I do for the rest of my life, at least I had this experience. I got to go to work while Dan Marino was still the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. Jimmy Johnson's there. O.J. McDuffie is now my friend, and all these guys. And then I started to build friendships and build relationships, both in the locker room, in the front office, and just built a career there. But it was do everything in the world I could possibly do to stay around there as long as I possibly could when I first got there.
Right, and it's obviously not about the money because you're probably getting paid peanuts.
Oh my God!
But it was about for the love.
$500 a month as an intern is what I was paid. I don't even think you can do that anymore. You would know the legality of that more than I would. But now I think they have to pay everybody an hourly rate. But it was like $500 a month. Got to eat there, so that was huge. Again, as a 23-year-old, give me 3 meals a day and or at least 2 and pay me $500 a month. And fortunately, being from South Florida, I went back and moved in with mom and stepdad and lived at home. And so I didn't have that overhead, and, eventually moved out once I got hired on. But for a lot of people, to do an internship like that is really tough because just the living expense alone. But I learned so much.
The Success in South Florida podcast is brought to you by the team at Rawson Law Firm. If you need DUI or criminal defense representation, call the Rawson Law Firm at 754-206-6200 or check the description of today's episode for more contact information. The Rawson Law Firm, helping good people when bad things happen so they can achieve their best futures.
And I always look at it as these internships, whether it's paid and it's minimum wage or whether it's, an unpaid internship, you're really betting on yourself. And
that's exactly what you're doing.
It's the exact opposite of, you go to a great law school, you're in the top 5% of your class, and you're getting, you're working at in big law in New York, and you're getting paid over $100,000 a year, annualized for your summer, right? For your summer associate position, or maybe even more these days.
Unbelievable.
Right. This is the true grind.
Man, I wish somebody had told me that. I might have.
I know. Well, I didn't have those grades. That's why I'm here.
I'm sitting in your blue chair.
Yeah.
It is the exact opposite of that. I mean, and it's whatever. If you're going to go pass out paper, be the best paper passer outer that's ever lived. That was the mentality, and made sure that everybody in I didn't run around and go sit in Jimmy Johnson's office or what have you. But anytime anybody in the organization was going to have an interaction with me, I had to make sure it was a positive and impressive one, and that was the mindset.
And for a lot of young people, they don't have that mindset. So it's amazing that you cultivate and develop that through college, through the Cavs, just through everything that you had up until that point. Yeah. So it's kind of that old school work ethic, that old school mentality.
It was a requirement, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say one thing when, my basketball teams and even at the firm is one of our foundations is blue collar work ethic and skill or blue collar work ethic and mentality in a white collar skill and profession, right? So we're lawyers, we're white collar, we're, people think we're fancy. At the end of the day, our DNA, it's blue collar.
Right.
It's work our butts off,
right.
Just outwork everybody and good things happen. So yeah.
Love it.
So, all right, how long were you with the Dolphins and how did that position evolve?
Yeah, 8 seasons. So it was an internship in '96, and the internship came to a close. There were 2 people in the department and an administrative assistant, and I was kind of told this has been a 2-person department forever, they'll never expand it. And then it ended, and I was like, is there any chance to stick around? And I sat around and started considering, do I apply to other teams? Is there any, I'm sitting at the basketball court at lunchtime where everybody there is either retired, out of work, or they work in the restaurant business because they don't have to go to work until night. And people are looking through the classifieds for jobs, and finally I got a call that they wanted to bring me back, and they hired me on full time. It was 1997, got the job, draft rolls around. In the 3rd round, we draft this skinny kid out of Akron named Jason Taylor.
That.
I had to actually call Jason. I thought he'd be in Akron. I thought he'd be in Ohio. I was naive to the fact that some guys leave school. And I had to call him because Joe Rose wanted him on it was WQAM at the time. And I woke him up. He was in California training. He had left school and was training with his agent out in California. And that was kind of the first interaction we had. Ended up becoming, kind of fast forwarding here. But so that was 97, and I was there through the 2003 season, heading into the 04 the off season prior to 04, and he offered me a job, and he wanted to start a nonprofit. So it's just, again, thinking about these full circle moments, to waking him up to get on a talk radio show, to spending 20 years running his nonprofit organization. It's pretty wild.
Right. That is. Do you guys ever kind of reminisce about maybe some of the initial days of the friendship?
Every now and then, yeah. We talk about it every now and then. My memory's a little bit better than his.
Well, a football player.
I didn't have to run into 300-pound guys every friggin' snap. I got to sat in an air-conditioned press box.
Well, I remember, 97, I was 16, but huge Dolphins fan.
Yeah.
And I remember okay, everybody's saying this kid's either boom or bust. Yep. And it's just, can he put on the weight? Because the kid's a stud, just, skinny.
Right? And what's funny when you say that, and kind of tying into some of the things we talked about here, and I told your students about, I'm a little non-traditional in some ways, but it works for me. He worried about that weight for 2 or 3 years. He put on some weight, and then finally he decided, I'm just going to be the best version of me at the weight that I am. And he became one of the greatest to ever do it.
Oh, everybody said Aaron Donald was too small, too short, right? This and that, to this, to that, and look at him.
How about that guy?
Right? Yeah, yeah. So,
Beast.
and you know what? That's great, because one thing I learned through coaching was, because I've had amazing mentors in the legal field and the coaching field, and look, it's accentuate your positives.
Yeah.
If you're skinny and fast, then screw it. Be skinny and fast. Don't try to be something you're not. And I learned, we had this one player who was an amazing three-point shooter, and it was, especially my first year coaching. And it was, when Max gets the ball, Max shoots the ball.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about Max playing defense. We don't have to worry about him handling the ball. Just accentuate the positives and building a team, building that roster. We'll get somebody else or 2 or 3 other players that are really good defenders. But you do your job, and don't, which is counterintuitive to what a lot of people are taught growing up, is focus on what you're bad at, get good at what you're bad at. And in that field, especially when and that was an excellent team, high level high school basketball. It was, no, just go deeper on what you're good at, and we'll fill somebody else in the team to fill in your weakness.
It's interesting hearing that, because you're right. My whole life, it's like, okay, be really good at what you're good at, but then how do you make yourself better in these other areas? Where are you weak at? What am I going to improve on this year? What's my weakest thing I'm going to make better? And one of our board members at the foundation said to me, he went to one of these master courses that very successful people go to, and he came back and he said, man, forget that he goes, don't waste your time trying to improve your weaknesses. Hire people around you who are good at what you're not good at, and just be the best version of what you're really good at, because that's what's put you in the position you're in. So different mentalities, different ways to look at it, but there's something to be said. So when you said that, I was like, wow, that's very similar to what he was saying.
Yep. I learned that through coaching. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, all right. So now you're there at the Dolphins, right? I mean, you're having a blast. But what was it like when Jason Taylor asked you? So, you work with him, right? He's a player for the Dolphins, an all-pro for the Dolphins. It's probably, at that point, he's a mega star.
At that point, he was one of the faces of the franchise.
Right.
Dan Marino had retired. So when I say at that point, we're talking that 2003 heading into 2004. Jason and I had gotten very close, both professionally and personally. And quite frankly, a lot of the things, because he was more than just a football player, because he was getting invited to be on MTV, getting invited to do things that weren't just Sports Illustrated and the Miami Herald, my boss gave me the freedom to participate in a lot of those things, because I knew what they were, just being a younger person in the profession. And so we continued to do more and more together. I never wanted to be somebody's personal assistant. He wasn't looking for a personal assistant. So we knew we were going to work together in some capacity. We just didn't know what it was. And then, he had a child. He had his first child, his son, Isaiah. And he knew that he wanted to invest in young people that didn't have all of the things that he was able to provide for his son. And he talked to me about, would you be interested in doing this? Could this be the thing? And I bought in. I bought in right away. We came up with a plan. And is that number 4? Core value number 4. Go all in. And so I was. And I handed in my 2 weeks with the Dolphins and went home to his house. And we sat in the back patio, and he took out a blank sheet of paper, and he goes, all right, what are you making at the Dolphins? And he wrote a line down the paper, and we put that number here. He goes, all right, here's your new salary. What are you doing? What are your benefits? And here's what you're going to do here. And literally, that was the negotiation for the contract. Very different than those big-time attorneys in New York.
Well, maybe he learned from his contract negotiation.
I imagine it was very different than that, but it was what worked for us. And some people might say that's crazy. I had people within the organization say, why are you doing this? Like, what if he's not playing for the Dolphins next year? What if this happens? What if that? But I just believed it was the right time for me. He was the right person to do that with. I trusted in him, and we had a shared vision. And here we are 20 years later. We've been running the Jason Taylor Foundation, and I'd like to think that it was a good decision for both of us.
Right. And no experience in nonprofits.
None.
Right. So, and you talk about shared vision. I think that's so important too.
Yeah.
Sports, business, teamwork, culture, any of those things.
Absolutely.
And so as you're talking about that shared vision, what was it? Like, what did you guys want the Jason Taylor Foundation to be?
Yeah, I think for Jason, the big thing is preparing young people for the opportunity that may come their way. That was what's really important to him. We say, you know, one of our taglines is building a better future. We have a very long mission statement, as statements tend to be. But ultimately is like, can we support innovative programming? Can we create innovative programming that will help better prepare young people to be the best versions of themselves? And it wasn't about sports. We did have a football camp for a couple of years. He fought it off for a few years. We didn't want it to be about sports. I love sports. I invested my entire life in sports, but I don't know that I would have wanted to run an organization that just put on camps.
Because everybody does that, right? That's what pro athletes, like, that's the easy
So many of
thing.
them do, and it's wonderful that they
Right.
do. And as I say that, I'm laughing now because the person who won a guy by the name of Greg Darbyshire, he's in Cincinnati, and he's a dear friend. He built one of the most successful sports camp companies for pro athletes. He's got everybody from, you know, John Morant to Steph Curry to, I just saw this new, what's the new kid? He's
Anthony Edwards.
no, he's going to Duke.
Flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing a camp with him. Like, he's already, like, this guy's doing
Yeah.
everybody's camp. He did our camp. He's done, you know, everybody from Gronk to you name it. And he built a very, very successful business doing camps. But that's just not the world I wanted to be in. If we were going to make a difference, I wanted to make a difference in different ways.
Right. Well, and you talked to the interns earlier today about, again, being different, right? Having that creativity, right? And so it's amazing when former athletes, or when athletes can then go back to their communities or the communities that they, you know, are playing in,
Yep.
and give back to the kids. That's amazing. But when you're creative and you want to be a little different,
Sure.
your mind's always running, like you were telling our interns.
Yeah.
Right? I think this was a natural fit with somebody like Jason, who also is pretty creative and, like, has many interests in
exactly
addition
right.
to sports.
You're exactly right. No, you nailed it. It's that we, I think we want to be creative first and foremost. It's part of the reason why I left the Dolphins. I felt like some of my creativity was stifled. And that's okay. Like, certain things make sense for certain spaces. And there's a hierarchy. And I was the number 3 guy in the department. So you got to pay your dues and earn that. So just the opportunity to be creative was important to me. And I think it was important to Jason. But it also is important because you have to differentiate yourself, because there are so many different organizations. And you know, why should donor A give to you instead of another organization? Or if they're going to give to 2, can you be on that list? And so some of that comes with being creative. And I don't mean a dog and pony show or smoke and mirrors, but just finding creative ways to make the impact that you want to make.
And so what are some creative ways that the Jason Taylor Foundation has really helped the community? I know you talked to our interns about it.
Sure.
Definitely, I want to hear.
Well, I think the one that surprises people, not at this point, we've been doing it for 15 years, but the one that surprised people the most is our spoken word poetry program. It's called the Omari Hardwick Blue Apple Poetry Network. We partnered with a dear friend of mine, Omari Hardwick, who's an actor and quite an amazing creative. But that program was born out of a literacy-based program that we had. Literacy-based is necessary and standard and something that had to exist. But out of that came this realization that we could use this art form in spoken word poetry to accomplish these literacy goals, but to really engage our young people and allow them to tell stories that would empower them and captivate the community in so many special ways. So that's been, I think, if I think about what the legacy of this organization is going to be, I think we've done a lot of good work, but that poetry program has got to be right there towards the
Which is, again, something very creative and something very different. Not what you would think that a foundation from, a football player.
There can't be, I know there are some professional football players who like to write poetry, and some of them are probably involved in poetry. I couldn't tell you who they are. There can't be a whole lot of them. And Jason's he's not a poet. He was the first one to tell me, if you think this is a good idea, I'll support it. I'm not writing any poems. He did write one. He did come to one workshop and write one poem. But it was the willingness to kind of step outside of our box and be creative, and to do so because it was mission driven. We put the needs of the young people first, and we felt there was a need and that this could help fill it.
Right. Yep. Look, we've been running our firm on EOS, which is the Entrepreneur Operating System, for the last 4 years. A business system that's gaining a lot of popularity in with law firms and just other industries. Law firms always tend to be at the end of the innovative cycles.
Yeah.
But our thing is right at our
legal
firm now.
paper for crying out
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Who else uses it?
I know. Not me anymore. We're paperless here now, but
Right.
it took a while. Our people had an absolute meltdown when I said we were going paperless a few years ago. But
Well, I'm that guy. I love paper.
right. But when you have core values, when you have a mission and a vision, it's really that North Star for making decisions and deciding, right? We have decisions to make every day. Do you go to this fundraiser or that fundraiser? Do you go to this function or that? Jason, do I bring this opportunity in front of Jason or not, right?
Yep.
Do we do sports? Do we do poetry? Do we do one of the 15 other things you've probably been pitched on recently?
100%.
And you can't say yes to everything. So when you have that mission and you're a mission-based, nonprofit, right? And you have a vision of where you want to go and you have core values to lean into, I believe it helps people make consistently good or the right decisions for them.
Couldn't
it's so
agree
important.
more.
It's so important. So, and it seems maybe even without knowing, like through us, like the way we run EOS, you guys are pretty much doing the same thing though, by being a mission-based nonprofit and really leaning into those for decision making.
Far less formal and structured than that is. But you're right. It's like you have a mission statement because you have to have a mission statement. But if you really put thought into that mission statement and it does define who you are and what you want to be, then it does become, you talked about that beacon. That's anytime we ever have to question something that we're going to do, is this the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? You can go back to that mission and say, is this aligned with our mission? Because if it's not, then we have our answer.
Right. Exactly. Right. And it's okay to say no.
That's right.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about the fish tank.
Okay.
So what is the fish tank?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing it?
Yeah. So since 2018, it's a podcast that I do with O.J. McDuffie, another former Dolphin great, who made my 1995 Cavaliers internship very special there in Cleveland, or in Cincinnati was that game. But so I had been hearing about podcasts. Actually, an attorney friend of mine had been trying to get me into podcasts for years, probably 6, 7, 8 years. I'm like, I can't consume anything else. I love watching. My guilty habits is watching bad television. Put on America's Got Talent, or I love those bad reality game shows and all of those things. I love it. Plus, I like watching my sports and reading things. And there's no way I'm going to start listening to podcasts. There's just no way in the world I can consume anything. And a couple of years go by, and I reached out to a friend of mine, Ethan Skolnick. He was a writer still is a writer down here, but he covered the Dolphins beat when I worked for the team. And then he, really rose to prominence in covering the Heat and his coverage of LeBron James. And I hadn't talked to him in a while, just was really checking in. And I said, what are you up to? He goes, I actually want to tell you, I've started this exciting new thing. Well, he was launching a podcast network. And he was telling me about this network and who he was bringing in. And there were a couple people that were people I knew and respected in the industry, but the majority of the folks were amateurs. They were fans that had turned content creators, and he kind of brought them on board and built this whole network. I'm like, well, if you can pull this guy out of his garage and this guy out of Tennessee that's, working, doing whatever, do you have room for a washed up old PR guy who happens to run a nonprofit for a South Florida icon? And he laughed. He said, well, it's kind of why I, wanted to talk to you. Because I feel like A, you've got a bunch of great stories, and B, you've got amazing contacts. And I started to think about it. And I was like, well, I can't do a solo show. Surprisingly enough, I know I'm running my mouth here, but I can't do a solo show.
That's hard.
Who would doing a solo show is a whole different thing. And I have so much respect. Travis Wingfield, who's our partner at the Dolphins Podcast Network, he does a solo show and he does a brilliant job. And I don't know how people do that. But I said, I need a partner, and it's got to be somebody who played for the team. And O.J. was the guy. And O.J. was all about it. He loved the concept. And we took some fun, silly pictures underwater in his pool and created this concept of the fish tank. And we did the show for a few months on the pool table in his game room. But But we did have contact. Zach Thomas, yeah, whatever you need. He came on the show. You know, Channing Crowder came on the show, revolutionized podcasting at that moment. The Pouncey brothers were sitting on there's a great photo of Pouncey brothers before they got all slim now. They were still playing at the time, and they sat on one side of the pool table, and they were just monstrous. And they came on the show, and Aronde Gaston came on the show, and all these guys. And it kind of caught fire, and we built a little following, and it was exciting, and it was fun, but it was a startup. I'm chasing our dry cleaner down. Thank you, Ara, for the $100 ads that he would buy. My accountant, right, Rob Sokol. Oh, sure, I like you guys. My kid plays for OJ's baseball team. We'll sponsor the show. And I'm chasing down $100, $200 ads. And I get a call one day from Jason Jenkins, the late Jason Jenkins now with the Dolphins. And I thought I was in trouble. I thought we said something on the show that got us in trouble. And he said, no, I like the show. I like what you're doing. And I think it should be a part of our network. And they brought us on board, and the Dolphins licensed the show. And so now we're going into our 4th season with the Miami Dolphins as part of the Dolphins Podcast Network. And it's just been an absolute blast.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. You shared a clip with our interns of Brian Hartline.
Yeah.
So I want to just kind of, end on this. Brian Hartline, played for the Dolphins, went to Ohio State. He's there now.
He is, yeah. He's their receivers coach and co-offensive coordinator now.
Right,
yeah.
And he's consistently, last 3-4 years, been one of the top, or if not the top recruiter in college football, especially for wide receivers. But
for really wide receivers, be careful, because my guy JT now, he's recruiting his tail off at UM as well.
I know, we will.
Don't get me fired.
Yeah, for the offense.
But those guys are going head to head, and there's a reason.
And the clip that you showed was Brian talking about balance versus harmony. And here we are, 2024, right? Work-life balance. I still don't really know what that means.
Right. Well, he told us that it doesn't exist.
Right. So yeah. So talk to me about that, because you felt that was such an important 1-minute clip to show my interns.
Sure. Well, it also aligned with something you said, because I think you pulled out some of my stories from working in the sports world and made a parallel to working in your industry, and talked about sacrifice, and that to really be the best, whether it's being the best attorney, being the best PR person, being the best defensive end, that you have to be, core value number 4, all in on one side. But to be all in on something, something is being given up. There has to be sacrifice on the other side. And what are you willing to sacrifice? And some of that's healthy and some of that isn't. And I think that's where now we hear about work-life balance all the time, which is important. My wife and my 3 children are everything to me.
Right.
And fortunately, I have a boss who believes in it as well. But none of us got to where we are without sacrificing something. And so I felt that it was important because it aligned with what you were saying. But you have these very gifted, driven, ambitious young people that are all sitting in that conference room that all want to be an attorney for a big firm or start their own firm. And to get there, they're going to have to make certain sacrifices. They're already making them. The reason they're at the top of their class is because they're not going to certain parties that their friends are. They're not making certain poor decisions that their friends are that can be excused as just being young and dumb. They're giving that up. They're studying for 4 or 5 hours a night when they could just study for an hour a night and pass, and then have this other life. But they want to be, and not saying that they. I'm sure some of those kids also are athletes. Some of those kids are also playing music and doing other things as well. But there's no way. Brian Hartline's point was you cannot be elite, you cannot be great if you aren't sacrificing something in your life.
Right.
And it's just picking and choosing what that's going to be.
And he also talked, I liked how he kind of brought it full circle in a way, because he said there might not be the balance, but you can have harmony.
That was really cool.
With, and I look at that as, being at peace with your decisions and making the most of the other time that you have, right? And being happy with the grind, or
Sure.
you know, right? Especially if you enjoy your work, you can still have a harmonious life, harmonious relationships.
Absolutely.
While even though it might not be truly balanced, because you love your work, it's a passion.
Yeah.
So that really, really spoke to me.
I could tell that it did, which
loving
I'm glad that it, you know, you pull up a clip that speaks to the leader in the room and all of the disciples, then you've kind of nailed it. But and just that word harmony, if you think about, and I don't know a whole lot about music, but I imagine that when voices harmonize, not everybody is coming in at the same level, right? Some people are giving a little bit more, some voices are going to, you know, but the collective of it is this beautiful thing if it's done right. And I think that's what I took away from what Brian was saying, is that to be really great here, it affords me these other opportunities, but I can't do this without my family. It's just, where do they fit in, and where does going out with my friends fit in, and where does everything
just
else?
personal time even, right?
it.
Hey, sometimes I want to sit home and play video games. Well, you know, there's only a limited amount of time,
That's
or
right.
whatever it may be for you as a person. So, you know, Seth, this was amazing. Thank you so much for being here. What's the best way that our, you know, watchers and listeners can get in contact with you?
Yeah, so the Jason Taylor Foundation, jasontaylorfoundation.org, .com, .net, you pick which one.
Oh, you own them all?
Yeah, we learned. So kind of a funny thing, I think it's funny, I don't know, .org, if you're in the nonprofit sector, that's right, .org. I didn't know that, Jason didn't know that. Go back to not learning certain things. When we started 20 years ago, we are in our 20th year now, in 2004. So what do you get a website, you go .com, like that. You're not real if you're not .com. And about 3 years later, I actually had a media person try to accuse us of being a for-profit that was taking advantage. Because my email address is still .com to this day. I never changed it. But what I did quickly do was make sure that we had .org and .net. So any one of those, you can log on. Look, if we're very proud of the work that we do at the foundation. We cannot do it without support of the community, whether that's financial support, volunteer support, leveraging, you know, influence. All of those things are necessary. And then, you know, you brought up the podcast. So if people want to follow us at the Fish Tank 81 on all, you know, social media platforms, or as probably just like you guys, right? Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, we try to do our thing there as well.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. Well, you know I'm definitely going to want to talk to you further off camera about ways that RLF and you guys can.
We have a 2:30 though. I think.
Oh, I know we do. But another day,
you know how to find me, man.
Exactly. Another day we'll talk, because you know we're very charitable here, and anything that we can do to, you know, again, help our community, the local South Florida community, we want to be involved in. So,
thank you.
Yeah, Seth, thank you so much.
Would be
this
amazing.
was amazing.
It was great.
All right,
had a good time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, take care.